Hello. Hope you all are having a good Google Cloud Next. I'm really excited to talk to you today. We're going to be talking about building AI-powered games with Flutter and Google Gemini. And if you're not familiar, Gemini is Google's awesome LLM. And so we've been having a lot of fun with it. My name's Joanna May. I am one of the engineering leads at Very Good Ventures. I'm here with my boss, Jorge Coca, who's head of engineering, and we're going to be showing off some of the cool stuff that we've been up to. So we're going to end up covering a couple of things. We're going to be adding AI to games. We're going to talk about how you can personalize the game with AI. We're going to be talking about how you can maximize your success by leveraging building apps for all different platforms with Flutter and Dart. And then we're going to be talking about the Flame game engine for Flutter, which a lot of my colleagues have been working on, which is really fun to talk about. And then we're going to talk about adding Gemini to the app, to your game. And then we're going to discover the prompt engineering, full stack with Dart, and where to go next. When I talk about AI specifically, if you've done anything with games, for fun, or you've worked in the games industry, you know that game AI is its own thing. You've got your hierarchical state machines, you've got your behavior trees. We're not talking about that. We're talking about neural network-based AIs and what you can do with that by adding those into games. So just a little bit of a distinction. I just kind of want to point that out. AI is good at a number of things. Specifically, I kind of think of it in a couple of different categories. You have the recognition and classification. We've been using this stuff for years. Object recognition, speech recognition, image classification. I also think of AI as being really good at doing things that sort of we humans struggle to do in terms of inductive reasoning. So if you have a large set of data, as a human, it's really painful to kind of comb through that and sort of figure out, what the big picture is, what the story is, or what's happening inside all that information. And so AIs are really good because they've seen so much stuff. They can just sort of infer all that information. So they're great at summarization. They're great at sentiment analysis or anomaly detection. And also, they're getting really good at making things. So we're seeing them produce all kinds of great code, prose, poetry, et cetera, images, music, and even video now. If you're building, a game, you're already often leveraging AI anyway at the hardware level with AI upscaling and stuff that the graphics card manufacturers are working on, which is really fun. And then we also will probably start seeing, and maybe somebody's already doing this, we'll probably start seeing people augment procedural generation by adding AI as a second pass or finding a way to marry it with the typical procedural algorithms that we've been using all along. And then finally, if you're doing mixed reality, you're going to want potentially to be able to pick up an object in your room and for that to be recognized. And then as we start seeing more and more consumer-focused neural network processors on hardware and phones and laptops, we're going to be able to start leveraging local models to produce stuff on the fly with zero latency. And I believe Google actually has been working on a local model version of Gemini, if I remember correctly. And so we want to talk specifically about using LLMs in games, because that's what we've been playing with. And it's really nice, because as humans, for the next, a couple 100,000 years, we're probably going to be limited with our 10 fingers. So you can only add so many buttons to a game controller before it's not that useful. And so it's kind of settled out, it's kind of evened out, and it's just been refinements for the last few years. And so to that extent, if you need inputs that aren't Twitch-based and need to be fired right away, you can start using AI to create voice interfaces, and you can use LLMs to sort of translate text that someone's speaking that you're using AI speech recognition for, and you can turn that into a sequence of structured data with the LLM and sort of turn those into commands for the game on the fly. And the LLMs are good enough to give you those structured responses now. So it's really fun. You can also use LLMs just as like the way you would talk to a person. or a DM, you can have the LLM act as a sort of like a guiding force or personality that then takes the information in your game, evaluates what's happening, using its awesome like inductive skills, and then you can pass that into your traditional game structures and filter that through all through the way through your game components and various services, and then you can make it essentially act as a high-level guiding force for the narrative in your game. And so that's going to lead you into like creating these adaptive narratives, especially if you're building stuff like with large open worlds. You can really add a lot of personality to just everything in the game, and even create this huge narrative arc by using an LLM to sort of create a specific sequence of events that makes sense in your game story. And then lastly, it's really interesting because you can use an LLM to sort of summarize game activity. Because they're good at processing all that information, if you just keep a log of everything that's happening in the game, you can have the LLM then provide a summary at the end of the day or however your game works and sort of say, oh yeah, this is what happened, but it can put a narrative twist on it and put a spin on it because it's like a human storyteller in a lot of ways. And so that's kind of what I think a lot of this is headed, and I think with local models we'll start seeing more and more stuff start taking advantage of this. And so we actually built something. So if you went by the Very Good Ventures booth, you probably saw that we have a little game demo running. And so we built a little mystery, adventure, puzzle, escape room type of game. And we built that as a sort of like top-down 2D type of game where you walk around, and if you find one of the puzzles in the escape room, up pops up a little quiz question. And so if you get the question right, then you can find the next puzzle and keep going. And if you get enough of the questions right, you win. And if you get too many wrong, you lose. And so it's pretty simple. But the twist that we added to this is that we essentially took your information at the start of the game, your job title and your company, and we sort of used that to create a prompt for the AI, for Google Gemini, to customize the kind of questions that you would see in the game. And so we actually do that as soon as you start, we ask the AI to generate the questions, and then we sort of just populate the game world, and you just play as normal, not knowing any better. And so I'd like to show you what that looks like here. So we've already filled out the information. It kind of went by, and we'll show it again in a second. And so there it is, loading and talking to the AI and doing all that in the background. And so we're just moving around the escape room here, and we're trying to find that. And so it's asked us a question, and it looks like we got it right because nothing bad happened. And so we're going to go find the next puzzle question. And it looks like we're having a little, we're thinking about it. We're trying to figure out what the right answer for this one is. And we asked for a hint, which is also AI generated as well. And we got that right. So we're going to go look for the last puzzle question. And it's over by the printer. And so we got that right as well. And you can see that it shows us everything that happened in the game, which is these screens here. So at the start of the game, you've got the form where you put in your information so we can say hi to you later. And then you add where you work and your interests and things like that, and optionally sign up for our newsletter. And then at the end of the game, we show you your stats, which isn't shown here. And then we show you the AI prompt that we generated or used to generate your custom experience. And so you can come check that out. It's really fun. And we had a lot of fun building it. And so if you know anything about Very Good Ventures and what we like to do, we've been building with Dart and Flutter, which is Google's awesome cross-platform app development framework. And we've been doing that for years, and we absolutely love it. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about Flutter and kind of express, I guess, what it can do for you. And whether or not you know it, you're using Flutter. There's a lot of very popular apps that are built with Flutter. You're seeing some of them here. And it's really unique because Google had awesome people working on it. And so they kind of had the foresight to sort of, I guess, look back in time and say, hey, what worked with all these development tools and what didn't? And they were able to create what, in my opinion, is some of the best developer tools that have ever been created. It's so fun to build stuff with Flutter, and it's fast. It's architected like a game engine, so everything's rendered, and it can compile down to native for platforms that need that, as well as do just-in-time. And so it's just fast. It works. It's smooth. It gives you great out-of-the-box support for like the material widgets, as well as the lookalike widgets for our other platform friends. And it's seamlessly integrated across Google's stack for generative AI like this with Google's generative AI Dart package. You can easily run it with Firebase and Google Cloud and deploy it, and it's absolutely just like super streamlined, and it's just given a lot of love and care by Google, and so we love using it. It's easy to learn. It has a lot of experts that have created a lot of great packages, which we've gotten to work with, and many of us work really hard to kind of augment that experience with secondary tooling. And it gives you the ability to do things that you might really struggle to do if you were building apps or games with native tools alone. And so for that reason, we picked Flutter to build this. And it allowed us to build this demo more or less in our free time for a couple of weeks, tops. And so it was just really fun. It was really fast to make this. And I cannot sing Flutter's praises enough. It is truly magical. So Flutter is taking care of the UI for our game. And it's taking care of collecting information and showing the widgets. And then right below that, we have the game screen itself, which is done with Flame, the game engine for Flutter. And then we're using Google Gemini to add our AI-powered capabilities to sort of generate your experience and customize that. And then lastly, we're using Dart on the back end to collect your information and the stats and all that stuff and put that on the cloud with Google Cloud. So it's been really fun. We're using Dart across the whole stack because Dart is the programming language that works with Flutter. And so we can just share everything across all of our code, and it just works, and it's magic. One of the awesome things about Flutter is that when you're working on Flutter, it will hot reload. And so you'll be writing code, and the screen will just change as you edit your code. And many have tried to do this, and it doesn't always work in every framework or every stack. And the Flutter people pulled it off, and they did an excellent job with hot reload. And so that's what makes one of the things that makes working with Flutter just so dang fun. Flutter has, at this point, Flutter can run pretty much on anything. And it's gotten support from Microsoft and others contributing platform support. So if you've got a device, it can probably run Flutter. We're using it from everything from like embedded Linux to iOS, Android, desktop, you name it, essentially, it'll run it. And the beautiful thing about embracing Dart as well for your backend servers is that you can share your models with your front end, which will run, again, on all those devices. And you don't have to worry about the conversation where you talk to your backend folks and say, hey, is this API model that's going to translate this JSON, is it going to actually be correct, or is it going to break everything? And you don't even have to have that conversation anymore. You can just share everything. So that kind of covers how we structured the app, where we put everything. And so for the game itself, we leveraged Flame, which is Flutter's, which is an open source project created to allow you to build games with Flutter. And I have some friends that work on it, and so I like to talk to them about it and kind of see what they're doing. And they're working on really cool stuff. They're adding like 3D support. They're doing absolutely awesome stuff with it, and it's growing really fast. And so you can see here, we've been building the Google I/O Flip application that we made. And Flame lets you do a lot of stuff. You can do really pretty, beautiful stuff with it the same way you can do stuff with Flutter. And it's easy to use. And we've also used it for the pinball application. And then we've got here a screenshot of asteroids running on an Android watch, which was built with Flame, and so on and so on. One of the neat things about Flame is that it's open source, so a lot of people have contributed to it. And it's built on top of Flutter, which, again, runs everywhere. So Flame automatically sort of just gets this, I can run anywhere out of the box experience for you, which is really nice and just kind of consistent with the whole theme of Flutter. And it gives you what you want when you need it. It's got all the basic physics. It's got your game loop. It's got the event system. Essentially everything you need to create successful games with Flutter. Flame is either already has it or they're building it right now. When you're building games, if you haven't done much of this, essentially, you want to break your game down into like a series of components. And so you might have a player component or an enemy or, in our case, a little puzzle that's on the map somewhere. And so everything is just sort of tokenized, is what they call that. And so Flame very easily lets you declare, oh, this is a component. These are the things that are unique about it. This is how, this is where it loads. This is where it processes input. It's just very simple. It's very straightforward. And it follows along with all the conventions that you would expect from Flutter. And with games, it's really simple. There's really two things you need to know about game components, and that's when they're added or the game starts up, you're going to handle the loading for that component, any graphics or media or assets that it needs. And then you're going to handle the update cycle, where every frame that's called, and you have a chance to kind of look at how much time has passed and sort of run your simulation or pass it off to your other systems in your game that actually handle your actual game logic. And so that's kind of all there is to that. And so at this point, I would love to turn it over to my boss, Jorge, who's going to talk to you about how we actually added and integrated Google Gemini with our game to make it the experience that you saw. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. So it was very exciting when we decided to do this demo because, we get to be here with all of you. And we're like, what ideas do we have to share with all of you? Hey, let's build a Flutter application. We love Flutter. But what's where the conversation is going these days? AI. So we were like, let's build a game that uses AI. We were so excited, but then it got the moment to build it. And I'm not an AI expert. I've been building user interfaces all my life. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, Lord, AI sounds really, really, really complex. So I had a moment of panic. But then we decided to take step by step and figure out how can we complete this project. And we decided to use Gemini. The first thing about Gemini is that it has full support, first-party support, for Dart and Flutter. This is a screenshot from pub.dev, the package manager that Dart uses. Like Google is already working on a first-party SDK for Gemini that it's called Google Generative AI. All you need is to get an API key that you're going to get from the Google AI Studio. It's like, OK, I can get an API key. I don't need yet like a PhD in math. That was my biggest scare while building this project, because LLMs, algorithms, all that stuff sounds really, really, really scary. But I'm like, OK, first step completed. And then what we realized is like, the majority of the complexity is abstracted away from me as a developer that has never used AI. I've been building user interfaces. I feel very comfortable with Flutter, the widget system, building animations. But everything that happens on the backend, it kind of goes beyond my level of expertise. So what we did was to build and abstract away this Gemini client. And Gemini provides this generative model where you can pass the type of model that you want to use. In this case, we're using Gemini Pro. But if you wanted to use something higher, more powerful, but also more expensive, you can change the model that you're using. Or when it's available, you can use Gemini Mini, right, for local models. And I was like, OK, I can do that. We pass the API key. Now we can start using Gemini. It turns out that entire game mechanic that Joanna showed previously can be done with 7 lines of code. And out of those 7 lines of code, 3 are boilerplate, right? So let's see what's going on here. We have a public API that it's called load game challenges. That's going to create the puzzles that we see during the game. And we're going to pass as a variable a prompt, right? Based on that, we're going to build this content variable that we have on line 3. And it's an array because one of the powerful things about Gemini is that you actually can build conversations. So an array is a great model to model a conversation. In this case, we're not having a conversation, so we just pass one item that it's going to be the text of the prompt. And then we call that generative model Gemini variable instance that the SDK was providing us, and we just simply call generate content. That's an asynchronous operation, so the way asynchronous code works in Dart is by using async await, very, very simple. You don't have to worry about threads or isolates or anything like that. And then once that response is ready, you just save it in a response, parse it to JSON. We're going to see how we do that in this particular case. And that's it. All of a sudden, we have the model, the information that is going to power the puzzles of this game ready. And I was like, wait a second. When I started this project, I was terrified because I thought that it was going to be really, really complex. I had no idea about data training. And guess what? I didn't have to do any of that. Like Gemini already does that for us, right? So one of the things that we noticed at Very Good Ventures is like, hey, it is really that simple to use Gemini. The answer is yes. So all of a sudden, people that don't have expertise in AI can actually the most powerful features of AI using Gemini. And that's how we build this game. And to me, that was fantastic news because that's going to allow us, for us that we build experiences, to build more powerful, more custom experience for end customers, right? At this point, though, I want to talk about prompt engineering because that's kind of like what makes this game a little bit tricky, but as you can see, it's not that tricky. It's just that you need to find what's the right prompt to get the results that you were looking for. So the first thing that we need to understand is like, what do we want to achieve with the prompt that we're going to create, right? It's like, hey, this game, what we want is like for every person that plays this game, we want a unique experience that only the player will have. So if I work at Very Good Ventures and I do quality assurance, I'm going to get one game that only that person will get. But if you work, let's say, at BMW and you build like the mobile apps for BMW and you say like, I work in the vehicle industry, you're going to get a type of escape room, a type of questions that it's only particular to that person. So every time is a unique game that no one else in the world will ever play. So that's the first thing that we want to do, a custom experience. The second thing that we want to do is actually tell Gemini, is like, hey, you're going to be the game logic. You're going to be the brains of our escape room. Be ready for it. The third thing that we want to do is, like, at the end of the day, we need to parse this information in a model, right, in a format that we want. Because if every time that response that we get follows a different format, it's going to be really hard for us to determine where the puzzles are going to be on the screen or even how to parse that information. We also want to minimize latency, right? During an escape room, there's a countdown of 2 minutes. So every second counts if you want to win the game. So what we're going to do is like to generate that puzzle up front and avoid making calls to Gemini while we're playing the game. And finally, we wanted to make it fun and challenging. We took this as a learning experience. We wanted to push ourselves and share something with you on a stage that we've never done before. That's the best way for learning. So the first thing that we realized is like we don't need to test actually our prompts in the game. That would be time consuming. That would be kind of like a stupid decision, right? So what we did instead is like follow through that fast iteration on Google AI Studio, right? That's like Google's interface for interacting with Gemini. They're going to give you the same results that your SDK will give you, but I don't need to be kind of like following the game and like finding the challenges every time. I can just test all that out on the AI Studio and achieve fastest results. The first prompt that we tried was very, very simple. Create 3 different challenges to be solved inside escape room where the main theme is technology. That gets the job done, actually. That's going to give you 3 different challenges, but those challenges could be anything. A, B, C, D type of questions. It could be like a text-based question, right? So what's the challenge with this prompt? It's that it's very open-ended, and it's not really customized to the player. It doesn't know anything about the player. So that is an area that we want to optimize later on. The second problem that we have with this prompt is that the response that we're going to get is not formatted to be computer-friendly. It's not going to give us a JSON output. So we want to tell Gemini, like, hey, give us a JSON model that we can parse and use in our game. And finally, those puzzles are not presented in a way where we know if they are solved properly or not. It might give us like a question, but it might not be telling us what the answer is. And that way, we need that information to determine if we win or lose the game. So what we did was to start iterating on our prompt strategy. So the first thing that we did in here is to improve and add more detail to this prompt, right? So what we added was to increase the text. And now it says, my aim is, and then we enter in there like the player full name that we collected up front. And I am the whatever title and whatever company that it was provided up front, right? So all of a sudden, if I say I'm Jorge Coca, and I'm the head of engineering at Very Good Ventures. Gemini has a little bit of information about me, so I can start making that game experience unique, personalized. And then we continue telling Gemini, you are the game logic of a digital escape room. This game is set in an office environment. Some people said that it gives a little bit of Severance vibes. Great. We want it to be a little bit like fun and challenging. And finally, we said your mission is to create 3 custom questions that I must get right to win the game. Please provide 3 questions about, and then we pass in there the areas of interest that we collected up front, or about the company where I work and the typical duties of my role. Turns out that playing this game, I found about a few things that I have, or like I'm supposed to be doing at work that I wasn't doing, so it's even helping me to be a better professional. That said, this prompt still presents a few challenges in the results that it's going to give me, and we're going to see those results in a second. Great news. The challenges now relate to the input provided. They're customized. I'm going to get questions that are particular just to me as Jorge Coca, but like if someone else is playing that game, Joanna, John Doe, whoever, they're going to get a different gaming experience. That said, the response is still going to be very ended and not like JSON formatted. And the puzzles presented, they're still not going to give us what's the solution or the right answer. So this is one example of a solution that we got from Gemini. At this point, Gemini knows that I'm the head of engineering at VGV, and that I can work on mobile development, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, whatnot, right? So it gave me the first question about mobile development. Which of the following is a common cross-platform mobile development framework? That said, it just gave me that, and it didn't tell me what's the right answer. Like, I can answer a few of those, but I don't have infinite knowledge about all the questions in the world. So we need to actually continue iterating on our prompt to get the right answer. So we continue adding more information to the prompt, right? We started expanding that prompt that we already had, and we appended the following. Provide me with the right answer for each question, as well as 7 other wrong responses per question and hints for those questions. Please, just in case, you don't want to piss the robots. Return your response in JSON format with the field's name as first question, second question, and third question. This is going to be very important. So we're starting telling Gemini, I want JSON results, but also this is the name of the fields. These are the kind of like the property values that I want to see in that JSON response. Each one of those questions must contain a field with the question, the answer, a list that includes the right answer and the wrong answers named options, and a possible hint. All of a sudden, Gemini has more context about what I want, so I'm being more specific with my request. And it almost got it right. So this time, we get a valid JSON response, success. We get field names that are corrected. Most of the times, we'll see that in a second, we get 3 questions. So now we're even closer to have like a game that we can execute every single time. And all the fields that I requested, they're being included in my JSON response. Unfortunately, sometimes this is not consistent. Sometimes I get the JSON field as like first question, but sometimes they're returned as first puzzle. I don't know why. Gemini is like that. It needs a little bit more of support, right? So what we added was to actually add an example. Be really concrete and specific. Yeah, it's a large prompt, but it doesn't matter. What we're getting here with Gemini is like a specificity. That's a fun word. It's very, very important to interact with AI, right? Because that's the only way you can achieve and get the results that you want with the highest level of success. So to the prompt that we had prior to this one, we added examples. We actually added an entire JSON payload. In this case, we're only showing you like the first example, but like we added 3 questions. So we add an example to our prompt that says, this is an example of a JSON payload that should match what we expect from you, Gemini, right? This is the first question. What is the most popular internet browser of the moment? Give me a hint, give me the answer, and the list of options. So with this one, with this format, all of a sudden we guarantee that those challenges are now fully customized. We guarantee that the response that we get actually matches the JSON model that we're expecting to parse. Therefore, we can present that in the game. And the puzzles are presented in a way that we can solve, or like we can determine if the player playing the game lost, because we know what's the answer, we know what's the hint, right? So to me, when we finished this and I realized like, The only thing that I have to do with Gemini is actually be really good at prompts. I don't need to train data. I don't need to create algorithms or anything like that. It opened up a whole set list of options and ideas in my mind that got me really excited that I haven't experienced in many, many years. Actually, probably since I started working with Flutter, because all of a sudden, I'm not tied to just Android or just iOS. I can be a product developer. I can deploy this game on a mobile app, on a website, on a vehicle, on Las Vegas Sphere. As long as there's a screen, I can run this experience in that screen. So I'm decoupled from the operating system and the hardware. And with AI, I'm even decoupled from the traditional constraints of APIs. I have more flexibility. I can be more custom and meet my customers, create experiences where they need it, right? Not everyone likes the same thing, and this is very powerful. So to summarize the key elements about prompt engineering, right? It's very, very, very important to give clear and specific instructions. Make sure that you define the right task that you expect AI to perform. Make sure that you specify any constraints that you have with the data that you expect out of it. And make sure that you define the format of the response if you want to parse like something into a JSON model or things like that, right? Add contextual information as much as you can. That's going to actually, context generates customization, and that's very, very important. And if you can even include a few short examples, right? Like, hey, I expect you to do this in this format. This is an example. That's even better because that's going to guarantee consistent results. That is very, very important, not when you're having a conversation with AI, but when you want to use AI as a data source for your application. That said, this is not the end. Because one of the things that we wanted to do with this game is like, hey, you're playing with this. It's a custom experience. You might want to save those results. We might want to follow up sending you an email with how the game was built. We're even doing like a raffle later. So we wanted to save this information in a database. So we wanted to still build an API just to kind of like interact with that database. And we needed a full stack solution, right? So what happens here at the end is like, hey, you receive your stats. Like we want to collect the stats so we can determine who was the fastest winner, who like what's the average like winning time or losing time and things like that, right? In order to do that, we decided like, hey, we're building this experience with Dart. Let's challenge ourselves and use Dart everywhere. Because I don't want to be switching languages. I'm not that proficient with JavaScript or Python. Like I'm very comfortable with Dart. And turns out that like my colleagues at Very Good Ventures developed this amazing backend framework called Dartfrog. It's very similar to Remix.Run in the sense that your API path is going to be file-based as opposed to having to create your own routers and all the stuff. So all you need to worry about once you define that file path, like how do you want to respond to that request that you're receiving? I don't have to leave the tools that I'm comfortable and familiar with. I can deploy it to Google Cloud Run without a problem. So it was a huge win because it's just in a matter of minutes, I can build that API and interact with the data that I receive. So what did we get out of that? First of all, speed. We were building this in our free time. We don't get paid for that, unfortunately. So we wanted to finish as soon as possible without actually losing quality. But guess what? That is not something that like John and I, we care because we were doing in our free time. Enterprises care about that. You want to do more with less. You want to ship fast and ship safe, right? So Dartfrog was the perfect solution if you were already investing in Flutter tools in your front end. On top of that, it's very lightweight. There's barely any boilerplate. It kind of like the memory footprint is very small. You can deploy, you can Dockerize it and deploy it anywhere, right? So we wanted to make sure that this is something that you don't have to be an expert in the backend to make sure that you can actually deliver high-quality experiences. And finally, as we said, with one single language, we can build our front end, we can build our game engine, we can interact with AI, and we can save and like interact with our different APIs, all with the power of Dart. And it looks like that. So if you wanted to do like a post call to be like, hey, I want to send the results of this escape room to a particular email, right? All we have to do is to create a file in a routes/escape room/send results/email as a variable. And this is the entire code that we need. In this case, we're using Twilio to interact and send those emails. So we retrieve our Twilio instance for the middleware and just send that information, right? Forget about like I've been doing like Ruby on Rails in the past for many years. I don't need to set up controllers, routes, models, anything like that. Just respond to my API. This is very easy to unit test. This is very easy to deploy. So it's a huge win-win for everyone. So where do we go from here, right? Like we've been talking about building these experiences. We've been building a game with Flutter that we know that we can deploy anywhere. As long as there's a screen, Flutter can run there, right? And no one will notice the difference. Like you can put the same application built with native technologies and with Flutter, and I'm telling you, no one will be able to separate one from the other. I'm sure that many of you are actually using multiple Flutter applications in your phone already. If someone is staying at the MGM Grand, the MGM application is built with Flutter, hint, hint. We've been also using Gemini, and we've been using the first-party SDK that we got from Google to build that experience, to create like those challenges everywhere. We've also been using Flame to run the game mechanics, right? Like we need an unload method to run our sprites. We need that update API to move the player around the screen to determine collisions and all the stuff, right? But it's all part of the same toolkit. And then we've been using Dartfrog to deploy our backend APIs. So to me, it's not about what we can do today. It's about what we can build next, right? Like if we can build this personalized custom experience in just a couple of weekends, what can you do as a company with the right focus and dedication and the right expertise? So the first idea that comes to mind is extreme levels of customization, unique experiences for everyone, right? We just built this game getting your name, the place where you work, your title, and a few areas of interest. That's just like 3 pieces of data, but usually you know your customers better than like what we do with this game, right? So you can actually offer them the solutions that they need when they need them. And that to me is a power that unlocks AI. But then if you think about the cost of that, like if you have to create those experiences separately for iOS, Android, your web team, embedded systems, like if you're a car manufacturer, you have to build it for the navigation system. If you're like in healthcare, you might need to build it for like your like like the tablets that they have in the office to check you in and all that stuff. That gets expensive, and that's where Flutter shines. One single code base, worry about your brand, worry about your product, and build those experiences for every single screen. You don't have to worry about the cost. It's all streamlined. It's also going to give you a higher level of focus on the real complex problem. It's not the platform problems that you have. It's not going to be whether you can deploy this to Android or iOS, right? Like, we need to decouple ourselves from that mentality and just focus on the product that we want to build, right? And that product, that is the real complex because, what's important today for customers might change 2 years from now. You want to make sure that you adapt and react to those changes as fast as possible. Even better, not just react, lead. You want to innovate. And that's the flexibility that Flutter, in combination with Gemini and just streamlining your toolkit, gives you. It's not a technology problem anymore. It's a matter of execution. And finally, let the data speak. Be more detailed and thorough through the analysis than ever before, right? Like that, to me, is the real power of Gemini and all these LLM models. We've had huge amounts of data, both public, both private. Think about all the information that we have typically on even Confluence or Jira and things like that. Those are great historic records, but we don't do anything with it. But AI can empower that, right? Can unlock the meaning of that data, and that to me is super, super powerful. But again, if it costs you 3-4 times what it should cost you to build those experiences, there's not gonna be any appetite to build that experience, and that's precisely where like that combination of Flutter, Gemini, Dart unlocks for everyone. Thank you so much. This is the end of the talk. If you want to come and play the game, actually, you can stop by the expo hall on booth 1160, and we're like running the game for everyone. We're also doing like a raffle for Google Pixel Buds, so it's a great motivation also to play the game. And also, if you want to learn more about how the game is being built beyond this session, check out our blog series, because we're going to be releasing like a blog post with like more like code snippets and things like that. We're even going to open source the code, right? Like at Very Good Ventures, we are big believers that the best way to learn is through examples, through having things that you can read, share, try to imitate, and then you can build it on your own. So we're going to be publishing this as an open source solution really soon. So please stay tuned. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, stop by and say hi, booth 1160. Thank you.